Bonjour and bienvenue, patrons. Woo! It is time for that old Sovereign Tech. Well, it's your Wednesday Q&A. A little shake-up from, the emotions of normal people that we have been going over the past few days for Sovereign Tech First University. I actually got a ton of questions about that I might be getting into later, but why start there? You know, actually where I am starting. I'm starting this morning off with some coffee, and it's... The coffee's called Jamaican Be Happy, or Jamaican Me Happy. Sorry, not Be Happy. And what a ridiculous name. But not unflavorful. It smells better than it actually tastes, but it's certainly not my Death Wish coffee, that's for sure. Of course, I'm a huge fan of Zach Wild's coffee, that being Odin Force, which is done through Death Wish Coffee Company. Or Valhalla Java, Odin Force, Valhalla Java, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure which one of those is actually the name of the coffee and which is sort of the sub-brand, the idea that he ran with. But huge fan of Zach Wild. Actually hung out with Zach Wild in the past. And, well, I've told that story before. Anyway, I'm not going to tell it again. Yeah, boy, and actually we're going to talk quite a bit of metal later on too. Got some really great questions about that from the Twitterverse, as it were. But if you'll excuse me, just going to have a sip of this Jamaican Me Happy. Ooh, all right. It is a tough thing to be able to have that small amount of silence. You never want silence in a podcast, and I try not to. I try to make the swallowing sounds as loud as I possibly can so you know exactly what's going on. But anyway, all right, woo, I am hyped up. I'm ready to go. We're ready to get into this. Well, before I even do that, a couple things. Okay, so first off, last night, of course, this is getting recorded on, is this July 11th? Yes, July 11th, 2018. Remarkable. On July 10th, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I, the boss, we went to, it was in Manchester, in our home geographic area of New Hampshire. They had some wrestling on, baby. And so we went to SmackDown Live. Now, I haven't watched the replay. In fact, this is going to kind of meld in nicely to our first question here. I haven't watched the actual episode of SmackDown Live, which SmackDown, so the WWE, I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time talking about this, so if wrestling just makes you go cross-eyed or glassy-eyed or something, relax. This won't take but a minute, or won't take but a couple minutes. So SmackDown is one of two major flagship shows that the WWE, which used to be the WWF, puts out there, okay? And it's on Tuesday nights. It's done live. It's called SmackDown Live now. There was a time where SmackDown was not live, but it was actually still recorded on Tuesday nights, but they'd air it on Thursdays. This is back in the old days on UPN when they would do that. And, of course, actually the term itself, SmackDown, is a completely invented word by none other than The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And so one could argue it's kind of his show, always been his show. Of course, he's not really in the wrestling biz at the moment right now. He's too busy doing, what's his new movie, Skyscraper or whatever. Anyway, so SmackDown is, it's kind of considered the secondary show. Like Raw is the main show. SmackDown is considered sort of the secondary. Now, up until recently, there was, every year, all right, here's a little background real quick. So Raw and SmackDown are treated as two opposing brands, as in within the company of WWE. Think of WWE as the parent company. And then you have little companies underneath that. One of them is Raw. One of them is SmackDown. Now, they're all part of WWE, but they're considered separate properties, okay? And they have separate championships, separate all kinds of things. They even had separate pay-per-views for a while, but that didn't take off, I think, like they expected. So now their pay-per-views are what they call co-branded. Now there's NXT, there's 205 Live, there's other shows and other quote-unquote brands that you could argue that the WWE has. It's not just Raw and SmackDown, but Raw and SmackDown are their big ones. They're the biggies. And SmackDown, so what they'll do is every year they'll have what they call a superstar shakeup. Superstar is a reference to the wrestlers or the performers in general. And they will have, they'll change brands. Like they'll do kind of a draft pick, right? Like other sports organizations will do out of colleges or something. They'll do draft picks. And so up until this past year's 2018 Superstar Shakeup, really I thought SmackDown had the better lineup of wrestlers. Like by a long shot, they had the better lineup of wrestlers, including of new and upcoming talent. But that kind of changed. And now I think Raw is like overloaded with a lot of really the best people. In fact, so as far as like, and what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of review of what I thought of SmackDown Live. And there's a pay-per-view coming. Of course, they do one a month at least. There's a pay-per-view coming up this Sunday. So this was a SmackDown leading up to a pay-per-view, which usually those are like a really weak show. At least in recent years, I feel like they've been weaker shows because they'll just do a bunch of bullshit that's just prepping you for, instead of any actual setup, they'll just do a bunch of bullshit prepping you for the upcoming pay-per-view. But they had pretty good matches throughout this SmackDown. I mean, the wrestling was pretty fair for the matches that were had. Now, wrestling itself, let's be clear about this. Very few people actually wrestle anymore. And I don't mean that they don't get in the ring. I mean that they actually like do wrestling holds and moves. You don't really see anybody give another person a wrist lock anymore, or all this different shit. Now it's all, I don't know, like just bumps and flies. Like it's the wrestling in general compared to what it was to even just a few years ago is pretty weak stuff. Like you're not seeing great technical wrestling often enough. And it looks like a lot of the guys wouldn't even know how to react or what to do. If there was like an actual technical wrestler in there with them, even though some of these guys I think are capable of it, but still it's anyway, I'm not as impressed with the amount of wrestling that goes on today as in the amount of actual technical wrestling compared to, I don't know, just the real flashy stuff. But there were some pretty good matches. I mean, and there was some wrestling that went on. The main attraction, who's probably might be the best wrestler overall that the WWE has right now, he barely showed up, and it was Samoa Joe, who, I mean, is just a tremendous fucking wrestler, and also not just a great wrestler, but a great talker, which WWE is also severely lacking in that. They don't have any or barely any great talkers. But Samoa Joe can both wrestle your fucking ass off and technical wrestle your ass off, and he can talk. But they barely had him come out, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck? So anyway, but I mean, we don't get this often in New Hampshire, so it was very nice. It was a fun night. And there was some pretty fun stuff that was going on and everything. And Stephanie loved it. She and I, we were both, and it was great. Stephanie's awesome because like we're rooting for the villains, the whole time, or what they call the heels in the business. We're rooting for the villains, and we're like the only ones rooting for the villains. And like little kids are like turning and looking at us like, wait, why are they clapping because AJ Styles lost? It was so great. She is the best. That was awesome. But it was a fun night, just go down to Manchester and just just in the backyard there and go see some WWE wrestling. I don't know if we showed up at all, on camera. We had pretty close seats. We weren't ringside, but we were pretty damn close. And I'm pretty sure I'm like one of two people. The other one was a gal that I saw there. I was one of two people that had a red and black NWO shirt on. And of course I'm kind of a larger guy, so you kind of can't miss me anyway, but I guess, but if you see a guy wearing, I brought my title belt and everything, but I was like, nah, I'm not going to mess with that because the seats are probably going to be cramped in this place and everything because, New Hampshire's not going to have this massive fucking arena, right? Maybe this thing could have, the arena or the auditorium that they had it in maybe could fit 2,000. I don't know. It's where a lot of wrestling shows are in venues that can fit, 10 to 20, if not significantly more. So I was like, yeah, no, I'll leave the belt. I left it in the car. So even though I did bring it. But yeah, so I don't know, if you watch SmackDown, you might be able to see me there. So there's another thing I want to talk about quick, but I'm going to save that just because this bleeds so well into our first question for this week. And this is a tech question. Then we've got, I guess you could say kind of a philosophical question of sorts. And then we're going to get into we're going to get into some fun questions and we'll get our album of the week. But yeah, just had a fun night, and it was a fine show for what it was, seeing SmackDown live. And it's always nice to, just go out and do shit. So get out of the house. You know what I mean? All right, so let's talk about this here. So I'll read it. Hey, Stallion, you've recently waved the red flag on the torrent community on Sovereigntech Prime, and with recent unprecedented cases of downtime for Pirate Bay, what would you do if torrenting came to a complete halt somehow, or what do you see as the next step that we can go from? I think he means where we can go from here. But anyway, regardless. Okay, great question, and yeah. So this is pertinent for a few reasons. One is that the way that actually Stephanie and I watch wrestling generally, on TV, because obviously they're not, these live shows aren't happening in New Hampshire all the time, right? Or even in the area. I download the episodes, right? Now you can. So what would happen, like if torrenting somehow I think that's what you're asking. What if torrenting just came to a complete stop somehow? I mean, obviously I think that's impossible. Like that's just never really going to happen. Like the red flag that I've raised on Sovereigntech about the torrenting community is more specifically, and I think you know this, but I'm just making it clear for everybody else, is more specifically that there's just a lot of people that just don't care anymore because there's the convenience of, say, Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or CBS All Access or whatever. Okay, there's the convenience of that makes it, and I mean, when it's only $10 a month, I mean, what it costs to host, a good torrent library, would be oodles beyond that, right? So I think a lot of people just stop caring because of the convenience of getting access, which, I mean, understand, piracy, to its credit, forced that hand. Like, it forced the entertainment industry, no, you've got to give people what they want, when they want it, on demand, where they want it. Otherwise they're going to go to alternatives that make life so much easier. And that's what happened, but now the tables, or the wheels turning to where the entertainment industry is making access and everything so much easier that now there's, even things like MoviePass, even though, everybody keeps saying that that's going to die. I don't know what to believe as far as with MoviePass, okay? Because I hear so many conflicting stories. I almost feel like MoviePass is like Bitcoin, where, for like 5 years, everybody was just saying, well, Bitcoin's dead. Bitcoin's dead. I mean, almost by the day you get a story that says Bitcoin's dead. I don't know if MoviePass is actually dead or not. I keep hearing all these different stories. I can imagine where there's companies that, again, you can't believe what's happening online. In fact, I saw, hilariously, I read an article this morning that was by a blockchain company, that was talking about crypto PR, meaning public relations, okay, press companies that you hire, okay, and I've worked with these kinds of companies in the past before, that you hire that are specifically about getting you coverage, press coverage, as a crypto company, okay, as a blockchain company or something. And in this article, they're saying how, look, is there even a point to hiring one of these companies? Because, you're going to hash out $15,000 or whatever for some kind of monthly or multi-month contract. And can they actually get you any press because everything is so crazy? Now, they're not only saying because there's so many blockchain companies, but they're saying that blockchain news sources, and they didn't name names, but when they mentioned that, fancy graphics, when you hear blockchain news source, fancy graphics, what do you think of? Yeah, its initials are CT. You know exactly what you're thinking of, okay? And they're saying that you pay to play. Like that you in general, all that's really happening is that, for this PR company to get you any press, they're going to have to pay these news sources to put you on there. Now, it's not always pay to play. Okay, pay to play means that you get a paid placement, but they don't generally tell anybody that this was native advertising effectively, or that it was a paid for article. Okay, you can just pay CT or CoinDesk or whoever, just pay them outright, and don't bother paying for the actual like PR company, right? I mean, that's really what this article was more or less recommending. But here's the thing, is that I don't think this is just a thing and I know it's not just a thing in the crypto space, I think this is true almost across the board, that anytime you hear about a company or somebody getting some kind of coverage, okay, and this isn't, I'll tell you straight, this is not so on Sovereign Tech. Sovereign Tech gets funded by viewers like you. Woo! Okay, I mean, that's, or you know what I mean, I'm making a PBS joke, but you get my point. Sovereign Tech is wholly independent. I do not get bought out to, I mean, I have sponsors, but you know that they're sponsors. I do full disclosure. Most news sources in the tech world and elsewhere do not do full disclosure whatsoever. So it's not unheard of that, I don't know, the movie studios or whoever is trying to, like, is effectively paying for hit pieces in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, TechCrunch, whatever, against a company like MoviePass. And why would they do that? Well, I don't think that they thought Netflix would become what Netflix did. If they had any inkling that Netflix was going to become, you know, this monster that it would end up becoming, where it would actually compete literally with every entertainment company in the world, literally every entertainment company, even the comic book industry, right? Because Netflix has its own comic books and stuff like that. If they knew Netflix was going to become that, they would have done so many hit pieces 10 years ago. I mean, you would have thought that Netflix, you know, was like Dresden after the bombing. I mean, it would have, it would have been horrible, you know? So it's tough to tell. Is MoviePass actually tanking or isn't it? You know, I mean, and you don't want to judge by the financials, because if the argument is against MoviePass, we're going to get into the torrenting thing here in a second. Don't worry. If the argument against MoviePass is that, well, they're not, you know, they're hemorrhaging cash, they're losing money, you know, their balance sheets don't look good. Well, look, that's the same argument you would have made against Amazon every single quarter for the past, 20 years. Until they finally had a profitable quarter. But are you going to call Amazon a failure? Fuck no. They're the antithesis of failure. I mean, they are the direct antithesis of failure, especially, as far as tech companies go. They are the tech giant. There are no other tech giants. Not really. I mean, yes, we call them that, and I do too, but they are the company, whether you want to admit it or not. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, who knows what the reality is around this, right? Around, you know, with MoviePass. Because MoviePass, I mean, like the angle that they're going with is that eventually, I think they're going to end up making their own theaters. I mean, Netflix is already talking about doing it. I think MoviePass wants to get into that same game where they are, you know, they could end up taking a cut of so much of, because what MoviePass is doing. Okay, so I assume you know what MoviePass is. If you don't, I mean, we've talked about it on Sovereign Tech. If you're a patron, I'm hoping you know what the fuck it is. But real quick, $10 a month. It's like Netflix for going to the theater. It's $10 a month, and you can see a movie a day every day for a month, and it's the flat fee of just $10 for. You could go see 30 movies, and it's still only the flat fee of $10 for you. Okay, for that entire month of seeing all of those movies. How that works, you know, they give you a debit card, blah blah blah. Okay. So anyway, what they're doing is, one of the ways that they planned on making money out of this is that they were hoping, MoviePass is hoping that so many people use MoviePass that it becomes the primary source of income for a lot of these theaters, especially the little guys. Okay. And then what MoviePass can do is to say, look, we're your primary source of income. If you don't give us a cut of what gets sold at the concession stands, okay, drinks, popcorn, whatever, we will remove your theater as available from our app. You know, and so you're going to lose all your money. I mean, that is a, you know, fucking shark ass play, no doubt about that. Okay. But that was the plan. And I think that they were looking to eventually get to the point where, guess what? Like, we are your primary source of income. Let us buy you out, okay? And we'll franchise you. And so then there would be a bunch of theaters that are effectively MoviePass theaters. Now, you can say that, wow, that's really cutthroat, blah, 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 and sure. But it's a brilliant strategy, okay? You just got to be able to hemorrhage, you got to be able to effectively, you're bleeding running up a hill, but the medical the hospital's at the top of the hill, and you just got to survive to the top of the hill, and just be able to lose enough blood until you get to the top of the hill, right? And then you can get fixed up, and then you're healthy and maybe better than ever. And that's really what MoviePass is going for here. So yeah, I think they want their own theaters, and I think this scares the fuck out of the movie studios, because then what happens there is that if suddenly, Netflix making their own movie studios, that's just to play Netflix's shit, right? I mean, they could go beyond that, but really, that's kind of the main point here. And Netflix has enough money, and they could make enough content to where they could have their own movie theaters. And that, there's a whole conversation even to have around that. Okay, I know this is going well beyond the scope of the question, but I think this is an important conversation to have. I'll go back to the MoviePass point in just a second, okay? But Netflix having its own theaters, here's the thing, is that there really is, as far as what comes out in theaters and the amount of movies that come out, I think people would be okay with having a more curated list of what they see in theaters. It used to be, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, there was like one major movie, maybe a week, maybe even a month, that you would see. But there's a reason that most movies only last a couple weeks in theaters today, especially the smaller theaters, because there's just so many fucking movies to churn into these places. And I think to some degree there's a lot of fatigue and there's an oversaturation that is detrimental to the theater business. Okay. So Netflix, even if they don't make all of the movies that come out of Hollywood, I think if they have a more curated set of movies to see, that they could still do very, very well. And they certainly have, I think, a degree of brand loyalty. And the other nice thing about Netflix is I feel like they really do pay attention to, they pay attention to subscribers. It may not always be the case, but I think they do. The fact that they did that Sense8 finale, which ended up being awesome, when they canceled the show but they gave people closure, nice move. I mean, that was, I don't know a lot of movie studios that would do that. That reminds me of the old days, or the 60s, where, you could start a Save Star Trek campaign and you could actually end up getting 2 more seasons of that damn show. It's very similar to that. And so, kudos to Netflix on that one. So anyway, Netflix theaters, that could work. And I think its limited nature could actually be in its favor. Now, MoviePass, okay, let's say they start taking over all of these theaters and eventually they end up owning a bunch of these theaters. Now, the movie studios flip the fuck out, because who do they distribute their movies to? Either the movie studios are going to have to make their own theaters, which they're not going to do, okay, or they have to play ball with whatever MoviePass's demands are, see? Okay, and then MoviePass can start really making a shit ton of money. And then effectively the entire theater experience turns into a sharing economy, or, turns into a subscription service of a sort. So, yeah, I could see that they're scared to death of MoviePass and they are paying for smear, for hit pieces, in the news against MoviePass. I'm not defending MoviePass. I'm not saying MoviePass is some kind of great company. Okay, I'm just saying that it's very tough to know what the reality is around what's going on with all of these companies. And like I said, if the movie studios and even the networks had any idea of what, or TV networks had any idea of what Netflix is going to become, I mean, there would have been blood on the streets in the press against that company 10 years ago. It would have been ugly as fuck. Okay, just like it's ugly, with MoviePass right now. So I don't know, it really just, the stories feel like Bitcoin, where, oh, Bitcoin's dead today. Oh, Bitcoin's dead today. Like you get it once a month or something. And I mean, not anymore, but that used to be a very popular thing. So anyway, let's move on from that. We're talking about the torrent thing. So, okay, so here's the deal. Yeah, one of the main things that I do torrent per week is I download the latest wrestling. I'll download SmackDown and Raw, and we'll watch it. Now, if that went away, yeah, I mean, let's hone it down to the wrestling example. I'd run into a bit of a problem, and let me explain. So there's the WWE Network, which is the WWE's own streaming service that has a ton of their content, blah, blah, blah. Irony is, you can't watch Raw and SmackDown on the WWE network. Otherwise, honestly, I'd pay for it. In fact, I did pay for the WWE network for a while, but then it got to the point where Stephanie and I, we weren't watching it live anyway, we would generally only be able to watch this stuff, this content, the day after. And here's the thing. If I'm not going to watch it till the day after, I can just wait for it to get uploaded to Pirate Bay, right? So, to some degree, why pay for it? And I would have paid for it because I love the content. I would have been happy to pay for it because of that fact alone. But the thing is that the main things I wanted to watch were Raw and SmackDown, and you can't watch that on the WWE network. So what the fuck, right? Now, they do have it on Hulu, okay? But here's the funny thing with that is that you don't get the complete episodes often enough on Hulu. Like, they have Raw and SmackDown, but they're often cut versions of that. The most recent example was there was the Amazing match, and I've never seen anything like it. I'm not going to say it's like great wrestling, but I've sure as fuck never seen anything like this between Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy at the Hardy compound. This match was totally removed from the episode of Raw that was aired on Hulu. So, you're kind of screwed, right? Like, and I guess I could pay for cable stations. Actually, I think we do pay for cable stations. So I suppose I could, watch it that way. But who the fuck really wants to pay for cable? Like, I don't really watch that much TV, at all. And there's things, there's stuff that Stephanie watches, that none of it actually is, or generally it's not available on torrent sites whatsoever. So what she'll often do is she'll pay for the episodes or buy the season ahead of time on Amazon Prime or something, because Amazon has those deals where they can do that with varying cable networks. So, there are ways around this, but yes, it's true. There are some things that if you don't want to pay for cable networks, okay, and, but if torrenting stopped, that, you'd be shit out of luck. You'd be SOL. Like, you're not going to be able to watch this stuff. So what would I do in some of those situations? I've kind of already gone this route anyway because of the fact that the torrent community has fallen by the wayside so much. I have gotten back into buying Blu-rays, which I'm happy to do. I'm genuinely happy to do. As far as music goes, yeah, fuck. I bought, in fact, some of it, I had to buy physical CDs. It wasn't even a matter of, there was a bunch of albums by Harem Scarum, which is one of my favorite bands. There's, I have a lot of favorite bands, but Harem Scarum is definitely up there for me. Good luck finding their fucking, finding their fucking albums. You can find some of them like on certain, digital media stores. Some of them you could find on Amazon as MP3s. Some of them you could find on, say, like Google Play Music or whatever. But, a lot of places just, for all intents and purposes, it's not available. Now, in other countries, ironically, and I've talked about this before, where like in like British versions of iTunes, literally as in UK, iTunes stores, you can buy certain albums you can't buy in an American iTunes store. What the hell? That's nuts, right? And you also deal with the fact that there are companies that I mention often, like La La Land Records and Entrada, that they will only make stuff available on CD. They won't do digital releases whatsoever. So, to some degree, like, we're already encountering this. Like, this is already a problem, like I've discussed on Sovereign Tech, that there are things, new things, old things, that the torrent community just isn't serving right now. Okay, and so you already have to get on board with, well, you got to buy your content again, and maybe you have to, some of these albums, in fact, it was funny, one of the Harem Scarum albums I was going to get, the MP3 version of it, so, it was Rubber, is when they had to rename themselves to Rubber. Okay, this is in the late 90s and early aughts. The MP3 version of the album was like $8 or $9 on Amazon, but you could buy the CD for $2.99 as an add-on item on Amazon, right? Like, well, okay, I'll buy the fucking $3 CD and just have it in a couple days. I don't need to listen to it right away. And I mean, but like, that's just ironic, that the CD somehow is cheaper than the fucking MP3s. Crazy. And I think the CD might have even been better because it has, it's the Japanese version of it. And so it had the extra tracks and all of that. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I would do, I mean, I guess maybe I just stop watching wrestling, because I'll tell you something else. I can't handle commercials. I can't deal with commercials. It may be the number one reason I started torrenting is just I fucking hate commercials with such a passion. I hate ads in general, which is ironic because I've been an ad exec in my past. But I mean, I just despise them. That's why I use ad blockers everywhere. I mean, I fucking hate it. And like I said, with wrestling, like, I'm happy to pay for the WWE network, but they won't give us their premiere shows. They only give us like wrap-ups and stuff. And maybe I just end up watching that, or maybe I just stop watching wrestling again, which, hey, fine. I mean, arguably, like with wrestling, it's kind of a unique case, right? Because the wrestling really, if a wrestling fan is honest with themselves, especially today when they don't let wrestlers really go balls out anymore, you only need to watch the pay-per-views anyway, right? And it's certainly for $10 a month that you pay for the WWE network, or however much it is. I mean, we used to pay, when I was growing up, or even just 10 years ago, you'd pay $30 to $50 for a pay-per-view, so you're still getting a great fucking deal. And then you're getting all the other shows and everything. I mean, I don't know. That's, I guess I just end up kind of, paying for that. I mean, I pay for Netflix. There's a lot of different services that I genuinely pay for because, again, the ease of availability and a lot of the exclusives that a lot of these, like, Audible and others, that they come out with are just tremendous. Like, why wouldn't you pay for it? Or like Pandora. Like, Pandora they have that new family plan now, where it's $15 a month and you get 6 accounts with it. Fuck yeah. I mean, that's a steal for what Pandora offers you, because it's such a unique service. In fact, it's a service that really torrenting can't mimic. Okay. So, I mean, I'm glad what the torrent community did, and in some ways is still doing, where they have very much forced the hand of the entertainment industry to shape up, and to do things, to do smarter things, more creative, be more creative in what they do and all that, and make things better for the consumer. I mean, it really, really forced their hand. And so, yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the only answer that I'd have is either I'd stop watching some shit, which that's fine because I have plenty of other things to do besides. I'm never going to be bored in life. That's fucking impossible. Hell, I've talked about this so many times. Like, I literally, it is, and I think this is true for a lot of people. Okay. It would be impossible for me unless life extension technology, really takes off. Let's say I live to be 100 years old because most of my family have been centenarians. Let's say I live to be a little over 100. I don't think I could possibly play every video game I own right now in that lifetime. And I'm 37. It's just not possible. It's not like I'm starving for entertainment or anything. There's plenty of entertainment, and I bought those games because I wanted to play them. But like, I couldn't go through those. I couldn't go through every video game. That's not to say anything of movies or anything else. Okay, just video games alone. It'd be absolutely impossible to go through all of those in my lifetime. Absolutely impossible. It's hilarious that I still buy new video games. I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? I mean, come on. So, yeah, you just, I guess I'd end up buying shit and just, or maybe I'd finally get through my back catalog, if torrenting actually, kind of really came to an end. And I'm happy to pay for this shit. I really am. Like, I'm genuinely happy. I'm happy to go to concerts. I'm happy. I mean, the WWE makes most of its money off of attendance at live shows. I'm happy to go to the live shows, obviously, right? I went to SmackDown Live. I'm more than happy to do that. It's not like I'm not willing to give these people money, okay? It's just you got to show me the value, of doing so. And I'll give it to you. As far as where I see this going next, like what's the next technology to take this over? I mean, ironically, in a way, I actually don't want there to be. So my answers are two. Okay, one is that the torrent community isn't going to get serious again unless companies try to start screwing the consumer again. Okay, and I know, Cody and all these, and Plex, and like I know about all these things. All right, I get it. that there are things out there that are still even easier than Netflix and all that. I know that those exist. Okay. The torrent community will come back, and it will continue to use torrenting technology, because really you can't really stop torrenting, right? And in fact, like a brilliant thing that unfortunately fell by the wayside was BitTorrent, the company itself, Bram Cohen's company. They had, what was it, Maelstrom? It was a browser and a browser and a platform, I guess I should say, that was going to rely solely on magnet links as it replaced DNS entries, and it replaced, the DNS system with magnet links, meaning that instead of URLs, instead of putting in an address in the address bar, you would end up, just running completely off of magnet links, which is what, Pirate Bay, most torrent sites will use magnet links to lead you. That way they don't have to actually host anything. And I would hope that something like that kind of infrastructure would come to fore if it were needed. But the only way that that's going to come to fruition is if somehow the consumer or the user is getting screwed in the end. And right now, I think with Netflix and other things, the user doesn't feel that way. And even MoviePass is cutting into this, right? Like, why the hell, if you only have to pay $10 a month to see every movie you want to fucking see in a month, and as many times as you want to see it in a very real way in a month, with the practicality of the amount of time you have in life, why wouldn't you just pay for MoviePass? Like, why the hell would you? Why would you go and download cams? Cam jobs like that. That's just stupid. Really. I mean, I don't think it makes sense. Well, it's not stupid. I mean, I can picture scenarios where you do that, but like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. So, yeah. I mean, there's that, but then also. And I've talked about this many, many, many times, and I talked about it and this is a red flag I keep trying to raise. Video on the internet or video over computer networks. How about that? Let's say that. That way it's not just the internet. Video over computer networks, and specifically over networks. Obviously, a computer can play a video fine. If it's local, I mean, VLC, rock and roll, have a great day. Okay, but over computer networks is maybe the one thing holding up the entire, and I mean this, the entire peer-to-peer revolution. It is the one thing that is keeping us from, because the technologies already exist. It's just the problem is that people want to do video over all this horse shit. Okay, with whatever peer-to-peer technology you want to choose. And in fact, hell, maybe video is what ended up killing BitTorrent's Project Maelstrom. Because, there wasn't like a great way to stream video over it. I could picture video. I don't know this. Okay. I haven't talked to these guys in a while. Video could be what's holding up MadeSafe. Video is killing a million great ideas. Online video over computer networks is killing a million great ideas by the day. It just is, because I mean, video barely works over the internet as it is. Just people don't realize it because Google and Netflix and all these other companies are pulling a million stunts, like a lot of real trickery underneath the hood that you don't see and you don't realize, and sometimes just causes a little problem with playing something on YouTube, maybe, to make you think that streaming video actually works when it fucking doesn't. Okay, believe me, Netflix didn't give you a download option because they didn't want you to be, or because they weren't worried about you not connected to the internet. They gave you a download option so that they, where you could download within their app, you could, or whatever device you're using, you could download episodes. They only did that to try and offset streaming, because the streaming technology, I mean, it's horrible. The bandwidth and the stunts they have to pull, it's horrible. The amount of caching they have to do, on the last mile and everything. I mean, it's a ugly situation that nobody knows about. And that every company is racing, as fast as they can to try and solve. Video is, sadly, is everything, it seems, to everybody. And if it weren't a part of the program, man, the shit we would have right now. The most amazing encrypted communication technologies and whatever else that we would have right now. I mean, it'd be mind-boggling and it'd be beautiful. Okay. So, as far as like how to solve torrenting and all, I mean, I kind of don't, whatever's next, I kind of don't want, because at the same time, like I want the teat of video to be, or, you know, I want people to get off of the teat of video in a very real sense, you know, so I actually want like Blu-rays and physical copies of media and all that to be the order of the day. Do you get what I'm saying? Again, I'm not, if people want to develop other stuff and if they do some kind of magic tricks to somehow have great video compression and all this stuff, I mean, good for them. Like that's awesome. And I guess I applaud you, because we all have different callings in life, I suppose. We don't really have callings in life, but you get my point. What you feel is your calling in life, you know, go for it. Okay. But man, it's just killing everything. I fucking hate it. And, you know, understand too, like I'm also happy to go to a time where, you know, yeah, I mean, Stephanie and I, we didn't have a video in the house until like a TV. We didn't have a TV in the house until a couple of years ago. I mean, we barely watched shit. Yeah, maybe we'd watch episodes of Star Trek or something, all of which I had locally. But I mean, that was about it. You know, we'd usually just like listen to podcasts together during dinner or audiobooks or things like this, you know, and I'm more than happy to go back to that too. But anyway, okay, that turned into like a huge conversation that I did not anticipate. So I don't know if I'm going to get into, there might be a couple questions here for this week that I will skip because of that. But there you go. There's your answer. Pretty much, I like physical media, and I am totally fine with going back to physical media or of having localized copies. I suppose that's my answer, of having local copies of whatever's going on. You know, let's get to where laptops are coming with, you know, 20 terabyte hard drives in them, and go ahead, put in all your favorite movies on that or something. You know, that's really where I'd like to see things go. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to save the William Moulton Marston questions for maybe next week. Because I've gotten a lot of those, and I'm probably going to end up getting more, because I will be releasing more of the Emotions of Normal People, and then maybe people have other perspectives or whatever on it that they want to get into with it. So I'm going to hold off on that. Boy, did anybody else catch? I'm going to mention this in this week's Sovereign Tech Prime episode, or either because this week might be Stephanie and Ellen and I, or that might end up being in later in July. I'm not sure, but whatever. The next episode where I'm rocking it alone, I want to mention this, but I'm going to mention it to you now, the Sovereign Tech patrons, because, you know, I like all of you to get advanced stuff. Okay. So Mozilla, they have released a Notes app for Android. I think it's just for Android. And it's a very basic, I mean, even more basic than Simple Note. If you use Simple Note by Automatic, which is the same company that does WordPress, I'm a big fan of Simple Note as well. This is even simpler. I wish I had a dark theme. That's like the one, not that dark themes are the most important thing in the world. I wish I had a dark theme. It's like the only feature I wish it had, other than it being so simple. But I mean, it works about as, just think of it as Notepad, like on Notepad on Windows. This is like the Notepad for Android. I mean, it's that fucking basic. And I think that's a great thing. Like, I see that as a plus, not a minus. And the nice thing is that I think you have to put the test pilot. You have to become a test pilot, sign up as a test pilot on Firefox, with Mozilla Firefox, which is where you get, like, test pilot is sort of their Microsoft Garage. You know, it's where they do like experimental apps and everything. Not experimental as in they break things, just experimental as in they're sort of newer ideas. If you become a test pilot, and then I think it gives you access to install Notes. And I mean, there's other stuff that falls under the test pilot moniker, like Send, which we talked about on Sovereign Tech Prime, which is a really nice, send.firefox.com, where it lets you send, you know, large files and all that. But the Notes, I mean, here's the thing, as simple as it is, and it's a very simple app when you install it, it's end-to-end encrypted, okay, and it's done client-side, which, right on. That's exactly how you do it. So that's a really nice feature, is that it's being encrypted, you know, right on your device. And what it'll do is when you install it on your desktop or wherever else you have Firefox, okay, you know, it'll put the little icon in the top right, and you can click on it, and then the notes will show up in the sidebar. I love this. I think this is such a nice little feature to have, because it gives you, in a way, it gives you kind of that cross-platform, almost copy and paste. It's so simple. Like, it's just a great way to send little bits of text between your devices. I think it's handy as hell. So do look that up. Mozilla, again, they just call it Notes. That's all it's called. They really should have given it a little more of a name, I think, but that way it would be easier to find, especially in the Google Play Store. But I'm using it. I like it. I like it a lot. It might take over as my main kind of note-taking app, which mainly I've been using Simple Note, or if I'm on a Windows machine, I'll always have like a little scratch.txt, which is just literally, Windows Notepad, available to just write something out quick. And there's other nice things to do with, here's the thing. So, all right, I'm going to say this quickly. Like I said, I will eventually get to this on a Sovereign Tech Prime episode. Here's the thing. I like a notepad or, a text editor that doesn't have formatting options, because so many times, and it's such a roll of the dice. You can hit Control-Shift-V. Well, for one, Office 365, Control-Shift-V doesn't work, right? Or with Microsoft Word, that doesn't work anymore. Okay, you have to like right-click and paste without formatting, blah, blah, blah. Even in things like MailChimp, or if you're using Google Docs or whatever, Control-Shift-V does not always paste without formatting. Sometimes it will just mimic the formatting that's there. I mean, it's really ugly. And whether that's the fault of the browser or what, is inconsequential. The real problem here is that that's a pain in the ass. So a lot of times I will paste stuff into Notepad and then paste it into whatever writing software I'm actually using, or whatever I'm using to put a text together, because I want to clear all that goddamn formatting, especially if it's a large text. So I like this. I like that Notes doesn't have, like you can't do italics or whatever. I mean, I think it might have some markdown abilities, but that's fine. I dig it. So do check that out. Anyway, just something for you to walk away with here. So, okay, let's get into a couple of these fun questions, and then we're going to get into an album of the week, which is actually fairly relevant to the questions themselves. So here we go. This is from Twitter. Well, actually, it was on Twitter, and then I think the person also put it into Patreon, which is definitely the easier way to get something to me. Do you believe that the 4 thrash metal, or you know what? Okay, I'm actually, so this is about the big 4 metal bands. Let's go. I'm going to go to the other question here, and then we'll get into that one. Okay, so here's the question. Do you consider heavy metal to be a subgenre of rock, or do you see rock and metal as 2 separate genres? Okay, awesome question. I know this is contentious with music fans, with real music fans, not people that just like their kind of music, but people that actually love music overall. Okay, and there is a difference, and because you get a lot of people that say, "Oh, I love music," but actually they just love their music. They don't actually love music in the abstract sense. I'm a person that loves music in the abstract sense, and I'm not going to say I have eclectic tastes. I'm saying I can appreciate a broad range. Okay, my actual taste is fairly narrow, but I can appreciate still and enjoy and respect all kinds of different styles of music. But sure, as I've said real quick, as I've said many times, I mean, I guess if you were to pin me down, I'm a metalhead. Okay, but then also if musical scores, as in soundtracks that are instrumental to, say, movies, if that was an actual genre of music, that's would be the one that I would identify with most, because that's what I listen to probably the most in my life overall. So, okay, now about metal and rock. Yeah, this is a huge conversation. A guy that I'm been a huge fan of pretty much my whole life, and he's been in radio as long as I've been alive. Eddie Trunk, who does the Eddie Trunk Show on Sirius XM, he does Trunk Nation on Sirius XM, and he has a podcast and all that. He always delineates, he always differentiates between hard rock and heavy metal. Okay, he's saying that there's a difference. I understand those differences. Heavy metal, a lot of people, want to say heavy metal is more of your, like your Judas Priest, Pantera, and so on, like these kinds of, like that, where it's a much harder, maybe faster sometimes, sound, as to where hard rock is something that can have a little more melody to it. I mean, now, and as time has gone on, like the differences have become even greater in most people's minds. So like Motley Crue would have totally been called a metal band back in the day. Now a lot of people would probably call Motley Crue a hard rock band because they don't do the whole, they don't do all that stuff. When like now that's only metal, right? In a lot of people's minds. I think this whole argument, well, where I really think it comes from is that you had so many, and you still do, you have so many legends in the genre of heavy metal, okay, which heavy metal for a lot of people started, I mean, there's arguments to go all around about this, but for a lot of people started pretty much with Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple, okay, that's where it all begins. In fact, I don't think a lot of people would call Deep Purple a heavy metal band anymore, even though they started the fucking genre. I mean, it's just, that's nuts that they wouldn't get considered a heavy metal band, but now people today would probably call them a rock act, So you had all these legends. I mean, you go down the list. Alice Cooper, you had, Judas Priest, you had a bunch of them. And the thing is that, to somehow, for marketing purposes, say that this person is like the king of this, or this person is the biggest, metal act, blah, blah, blah. I think they started to, like, music companies started to come out with subgenres. Like Alice Cooper would be considered the king of shock rock. Right? Like, what the fuck is shock rock? Like, what does that mean? Because on stage, he does some weird shit. What does that even have to do with the music? And look, I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan. Like, you have I turn around, there's a Funko Pop of Alice Cooper. Okay? Like, I'm crazy about Alice Cooper. So I mean no disrespect when I'm talking about that. But I think a lot of these subgenres were really just kind of created to create, or, to make, for marketing, to make people seem really huge and to give people like a top spot, to give them a number one spot, and maybe to even allow for more top 10 lists by, I don't know, magazines, Rolling Stone, or even radio shows or something where they want to do a top 10 for the year. Top 10 in thrash metal, top 10 in speed metal, top 10 in power metal, top 10 in blah, 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 blah. I mean, they can be useful. Like power metal, love, I'm a huge fan of anything that gets labeled as power metal, Dragon Force, Powerwolf. I mean, there's a ton, Rhapsody of Fire, there's a ton of bands to go down. Okay. So, I mean, it can be useful for describing what type of metal it is, but really at the end of the day, I think it's more has to do with marketing. And, so the question is, do I consider heavy metal to be a subgenre of rock, or do I see rock and metal as two separate genres? Actually, I really see, like, metal, I don't see as a subgenre. I think metal is very much its own thing, and a lot of people that get considered rock, I actually consider metal. More or less, if you have an electric guitar, like, you're kind of metal, right? Now, rock and roll, I mean, there are people who fall under what would be called rock. For example, okay, and this is, maybe the most proving point of how I feel about it is how do I tag my ID3 tags of my MP3s in my music collection, which is massive, okay? Rock, here's who I would label under rock as compared to metal, okay? I would label Rick Springfield under rock. I would label Richard Marx under rock, Toto under rock, Chicago I would label under rock. Some of these you might think would actually be pop, but fuck no, they're not pop. I mean, like, first off, they don't stick. They're still around, still making great music, but they're not popular. I mean, and it's not even like pop is such a stupid term anyway. But they break out some heavy riffs sometimes. With their guitar, but they're not metal. Like, I mean, they're not Deep Purple or whatever, but they would fit under, more of rock for me. Okay. But as to where metal, people that some would consider rock, like people consider Kiss to be rock. No, Kiss is a metal band. And yes, it is. Van Halen's a metal band. Like all these other guys are, in my opinion, are metal bands. I don't like all this fucking separation. I mean, if you've got a heavy sounding guitar for, 75% of what you're doing, you're a metal band. You're a metal act. Like, stop. It really gets annoying. And like I said, I think a lot of the differentiation in the broader sense, in the broader minds, or, you know, in the popular consciousness, I'll say, is totally created just for marketing purposes. It really is, you know, like that way you don't, you know, if you change your mind and you say that Van Halen's actually a rock act and not a metal act anymore, that gives you the opportunity as a, you know, music publication or music studio or whatever, or music company, a record company, whatever. That gives you the opportunity to say, oh no, this new band that just came out 5 years ago is the greatest metal act of all time. And you don't have to pay fealty to, you know, Van Halen or whoever else. You could say, well, they're the greatest rock act of all time, but no, these are the greatest metal acts. Like it's just stupid. I mean, it's not, like I said, it can be useful, and I get it why people may use those terms, but in general, I try to keep it as simple as possible, you know, because I mean, also, like, you don't want to hold a band to one style either, you know. If they want to, you know, if they want to go heavy, if they want, like, I mean, like, take Skid Row. So here's great band, right? It's still a great band too. Skid Row, their first album, what was that, 89 when that came out? Their first album, self-titled album, Skid Row, you know, 18 in Life, Piece of Me, all those songs. I Remember You. That would be called a hard rock album now. I guarantee you that gets labeled under hard rock. But then you go to Slave to the Grind, their second album, and they got harder. I mean, that is a metal record. In fact, it's one of, like, I think it's, well, no, Quiet Riot's Mental Health is the first metal album to reach number one, I think. I forget what Slave to the Grind did. Like, maybe because maybe Metal Health was the first one to go platinum. So I forget how all these records work out. But anyway, that was a huge deal. Slave to the Grind was a massive fucking album. But that is no hard rock album, right? That's a metal album. But then what do? Is Skid Row the greatest? And no one would say they're the greatest, but I'm saying for the sake of this argument, are they the greatest metal band of all time, or are they the greatest hard rock band of all time? I mean, both of those albums, like, sold stupid. I mean, they did stupid money, like crazy money, and deservedly so, because they're two of the greatest albums ever made. Okay, but you know, how do you set that up? And that's where, in my mind, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to, especially in my music collection, I'm not going to have Skid Row sit under hard rock and under metal. That's crazy. I mean, and then, you know, you could go to Subhuman Race, go to their third album. Okay, Subhuman Race is very much a grunge album. So now when I'm going through genres, I'm going to have Skid Row under all these different fucking genres? No, they're just a metal band. Keep it simple. You know, if the riffs are heavy, just call them a metal band. All right. And so, yeah, I don't like going down all of those roads. I mean, and I guess more to your question, is metal a subgenre of rock, or do I see rock and metal as two separate genres? I mean, to answer it flatly, I guess I would see them as two separate ones, because if I were to call heavy metal a subgenre of rock, rock would actually be a subgenre of the blues, right? So, you know, like how does that work? So I would consider them two separate genres, even though I'm so particular under what I would label as rock. I mean, I am super particular what I would label as rock, because it's so tough for something to be rock, I think, and not be metal, or at least based upon what I listen to, you know. Like I say, I'll give Chicago the rock label, you know, that's fine. They're not a metal act, you know. I'm not going to call them that. But also, does it really matter? I mean, Chicago is arguably, you know, by some people's metrics, or, you know, well, so for me, my favorite band of all time is Kiss. Okay, there are two bands that could potentially unseat Kiss as my favorite band, that being Chicago, and the other is Deep Purple. Chicago, like, I mean, you know, I'd never call them a metal act, but would I argue against somebody who comes up to me and says, hey, Chicago's the greatest band of all time, one of the most influential music acts in history? No, I'm not going to argue with you about that, because you may as well be right, you know. So, well, anyway, that's yeah. I try to keep it simple is my bottom line with all of this. So, all right, let's go into the next question here, which is relevant to this one. Do you believe that the four thrash metal bands, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, deserve the title big four of thrash metal. Okay, so the big four, I think that they deserve that. I mean, again, I think it's kind of crazy. This is one of those situations where you can see the marketing, right? These guys, Metallica's not Van Halen. They're not Led Zeppelin. They're not any of these major acts. But how can we make it seem like, we got it. They're a great band, and they are. All four of these bands are fucking awesome, and I listen to all of them, all the time. Especially Megadeth and Anthrax. I'm a major fan. I'm a big fan of Metallica too, and Slayer. But as far as like which ones I listen to the most, probably Megadeth and Anthrax out of those four. But I'm going to throw a curveball here in a second. Okay, with the big four, like you can just see, okay, how do we show these bands respect without having to constantly say, but they're not Led Zeppelin? So you come up with the term thrash metal, right? And then you come up with the term the big four. Totally fine, and also it differentiates them that they're a different style of metal. Like I say, there's valid ways that you can go about using these terms. I think they're totally deserving of it, but I also think, so that answers your question, but I want to throw a curveball here. Really, that it should be a big five, because Overkill, in my opinion, is actually a better band than all of them, than all four of those. Overkill, and not only that, like Overkill has stuck to their sound for like 30 years. They have not really changed up sound much. They haven't gone through for example, well, Slayer hasn't really changed their sound much either, I suppose. They've gotten a little faster here and there, but which is hard to believe. But anyway, so Metallica, they've gone through where Metallica wanted to be a hard rock band, right? They didn't want to be a metal band, considered a metal band anymore. That was a huge, people might forget this in the 90s. That was that was a controversy, and I remember even back then, like Eddie Trunk saying, it's like, no, your fucking name is Metallica. Metal is in your name, and you want to tell us you're a hard rock act or something like that? And this gets another, like Motorhead. Okay. Motorhead. And maybe the only reason, because Motorhead plays, most of the time plays so fucking fast, they might as well be a thrash metal band, but they want to be called a blues act, right? Or they wanted to be called, a blues act. And I'm not going to argue with Lemmy, rest in peace. I'm not going to argue with Lemmy. I mean, he's God. Okay. But, come on, like that's a metal act. All right. This is where all this shit just goes nuts. But if he wants to call himself, call Motorhead a blues band that's turned up to 13, then hey, fine. I'm not going to tag you that way in my MP3s, but okay, you can call yourself a blues act. Anyway, but my point in saying all this, Metallica has changed their sound, dramatically at times over the years, over the decades. Megadeth hasn't really changed their sound whatsoever, but sometimes they've gone a little more mainstream, like with Crush 'Em, and stuff like that. But they've had like such dramatic band changes. That's something that I think band member changes that I think kind of works against them, even though Mustaine is obviously, the main draw here. Slayer hasn't really gone through, dramatic band changes whatsoever. But then also, I don't think that their music is, I love it, but I don't think it's as solid as any of the other big four. Anthrax has gone through, you had the John Bush era, you had, of course, the original, Joey Belladonna, and now they're back to Joey Belladonna, and of course doing some of the best music that they've ever done, if not the best. Their last two albums have been tremendous since they brought back Joey Belladonna. But they've had two very different sounds. Like when John Bush is in the band, even though they'll do a lot of their classic hits back when John Bush was in, they're it's very different, right? It's not like the same band. As where Overkill has been forever, has had pretty much the same sound. If anything, they've only gotten heavier, and they haven't had dramatic band changes. And their songs, like almost every album's great, at least. And almost every album is fucking track for track. And even their latest stuff, like they're still coming out, like Ironbound, which, well, I guess now maybe it's almost been 6, 7, 8 years maybe since that came out. It's hard to believe that. But like, that's the best album they've ever done. Like, how do you pull that off, decades into your fucking career? So I hate the fact that Overkill doesn't get, that there isn't a big five effectively. I'm not saying these other guys don't deserve it. I'm just saying I think Overkill is a better band than all of them. And I'm not saying that to be contrarian. I'm telling you fucking straight, Overkill is just a better band. And they don't get the same amount of credit. So really there should be a big five. In fact, when they did that major Big Four tour a few years ago, was that 2010 or 2011? They all the bands actually said bring in Overkill because they know that Overkill should get that credit. It should be a big five. And then some people, though, they want to go so far as to say, well, there should be a big six. They want to like either put in Testament or, I don't know, Exodus or something. Give me a break, guys. Like, I mean, those bands are just fine and dandy, no doubt about it. And they have some good stuff. But fuck, you're not Overkill. No one's Overkill. Oh, damn. If you've never listened to them, listen to them. They will kick your ass. Amazing band. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. But no, I don't mind if they call them the Big Four. But I think it should be a big five. And actually, I think that Overkill should sit at the top because they have totally, just like Manowar, where they've really stuck to their guns. And they are metal for metal's sake. They've never pulled any bullshit like Metallica did. They haven't had like the lineup changes or the dramatic change, like Megadeth had, or the dramatic changes in sound like Anthrax had. And their songs and albums are just infinitely better than Slayer's. That's in my opinion, that's how it is. So anyway, there you go. Okay. We're running long on this one because I didn't expect to have that really, really long conversation about MoviePass and Netflix and kind of torrenting in general. But I'm glad we did. So let's get into our album of the week, and we'll make this kind of a faster one. This is from a band. This is a new release, like just came out in the past week. Okay, by a band that I am a huge fan of, and these boys, I think they're out of Finland. Where a lot of the great metal's coming out of, like Northern and Eastern Europe and all that. This band is called Kissin Dynamite, and they are this would be album number 5. That's so hard to believe. This is a band I've been listening to. They've been around for about 10 years, and their first album came out, and thanks to torrenting, that exposed me to it, because otherwise you'd have to pay a premium price, right, to get your hands on an album from overseas back in the day, if you remember what that was like, for like the serious music fans out there. And they had their first album, which was a self-titled, Kissin Dynamite, was just like blew my mind. There's so many great songs on there. Their opening track, Addicted to Metal, where they had Udo Dirkschneider come on, from Accept, and his own band Udo. They had the song Hysteria, which just you gotta hear that song, and it's not Def Leppard's song. You gotta hear Hysteria by Kissin Dynamite. It's hilarious. Metal Nation. I mean, there's so many great songs on that album. Then they had their sophomore album, which was Money, Sex, and Power, track for track. That is such a fun and really sleazy in a good way album. I love that. I listen to it all the time. Stephanie loves it too. She's a big fan of or she loves Kissin Dynamite. Then they had their third album a few years ago, which was Megalomania, which that has a couple of really badass opening tracks. DNA. I've played some of their songs in the past on Sovereign Tech. Because I just think this is a band that more people need to hear about, because they are keeping metal sexy. And there's very few bands that do that. And ironically, this is another one of those cases where I think it's a band, because they're so melodic, that a lot of people would say, no, they're not a metal band. They're a hard rock act, which is just horseshit. I mean, you get Udo Dirkschneider on your fucking album. You're a metal band. Stop it. Okay. So not that they claim to be a metal band. I'm saying everyone else wouldn't claim that they are. But Megalomania, fantastic. Now, their last outing, which I think was from like 2016, Generation Goodbye, I was not impressed. In fact, this is a band that a lot of people don't realize this with today's bands. Okay, now I haven't gotten to their latest album yet. I'm going to tell you about their latest album in a minute. A lot of people don't realize this about modern bands, especially a lot of metal acts. They are not going into any recording studio. A lot of these guys, a lot of these bands that you're hearing, Art Nation, I mean, a bunch of these other ones, they are literally, I think, recording in their bedrooms. and they have their guitars hooked up to a computer, and that's how they're making their sound. I've seen making specials that Kissin Dynamite has done where I think that that's exactly what they do. Now, normally with most of their album, with their first 3 albums, I didn't notice. If that's what was going on, I had no idea. As to where with Generation Goodbye, it sounds like it was recorded in a bedroom. Like it's kind of sad. Okay. And if they somehow hear this, I apologize. Like I mean, no insult. I really don't. I'm just saying that I felt that album was weak. Okay. Now they have their latest album. So Generation Goodbye, if you want to skip one, you can skip that one. But now their latest album that just came out in 2018, Ecstasy is what it's called. This is a return to form. This is the sound that I love from them. And it opens right up with a killer song called I've Got the Fire. And then it keeps going down, and just a very, it's not as good as their first 3 albums. They had some kind of magic going for them in those first 3 albums, but this is a solid rocking album that I was very pleased by. Not as, I think what it's missing for me, because the sound is great sonically, it's rock solid, no pun intended. I think it's missing from the songs. It's kind of missing the cheesy sexiness and sleaze that their first 3 albums had. I feel like that's not there, and I don't know why it's not there, but that's what it feels like. It's missing. Is that, I mean, there's still some mentions of sex and other things, but I want that. Like that's why I started listening to them, because they were absolutely, finally there was a new metal band that was unabashed about talking about sex, and having the great time and everything. And I don't feel like that's exactly there with Ecstasy. I've been listening to, it just came out, so I've gone through it a couple times already. I still recommend it, and certainly, if anything, if it points you to listening to their first 3 albums, which are pure gold, I'm glad to talk about it. But yeah, it's missing that element. It really doesn't feel as sexy as some of their previous work, but it's definitely better than Generation Goodbye. Definitely beats their 4th album by leaps and bounds. So check that out. Kissin Dynamite. Ecstasy is the name of the album. It's spelled just like the word is. And yeah, I was pleased. I was surprised to see, holy shit, there's a new Kissin Dynamite album. Like I had no idea that was even happening. It just kind of like occurred, which that's a great way to do things these days, I think. Of course, I can't wait. What is it? End of this month, end of July, we're going to get a new Hailstorm album. Talk about a band that doesn't mind talking about sex. They're another one, just like Kissin Dynamite, where they are unabashed, about laying out the sexy. And Lizzie Hale, like she has no problem calling herself a libertine, a hedonist, all that. I love Hailstorm. Of course, we've talked about Hailstorm many times on Sovereign Tech. So anyway, all right, that's it. We'll wrap this up. This one went kind of long. More content to come out, of course, throughout July, because we're just getting started, and maybe some surprises. I will see all of you on the other side.